Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Critical Weight Theory, where today we're going to look at the nuances of language, storytelling, and human connection. Today, I'm looking at the power of words, the subtle art of communication, and why sometimes the best talks are the ones that have no purpose at all. So imagine this: the old man sat in his chair watching the kids play outside. A simple sentence. But what if we add more depth to it and instead said the frail old man sank into his weathered rocking chair, his sun-spotted hands resting on the wooden arms. Through the smudged glass of his window, he watched as children chased each other, their laughter piercing the quiet of his lonely afternoon. Now, I think you can see the difference, right? Words paint pictures, and that one was a bit of a prettier picture. It had more depth. That previous sentence didn't have the same power, it didn't evoke as many emotions. So whether it's describing a scene, a person, or a memory, vivid language creates a stronger connection between a speaker and a listener. This brings us to an essential skill in storytelling. It's something that if you have an English professor, they'll probably say this at some point. Maybe it will even be a mantra, but they'll tell you, show, don't tell. So instead of stating Sarah was sad, you might want to show it with more descriptive language like Sarah slumped against the wall, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The difference: one tells you an emotion, the other makes you feel it. Another example: my grandmother's eyes sparkled like sapphires as she told me stories about her childhood. Instead of simply saying my grandma had a nice smile while talking, that's definitely less impactful as a sentence. Now, that's not to say you'll never want to bend the rule. Sometimes maybe a simpler sentence is better, like if you're trying to hide certain details in a story, or if you're trying to intentionally keep things vague. That that might be able to work in this story, perhaps even surprisingly well. So I guess if you have some instances where that was actually a better tactic, go ahead and let me know. Leave a message in a comment section if there is one on this video or something like that. But language is fascinating, especially when it comes to the small choices we make in everyday speech. Ever wonder why people say you're not wrong instead of you're right? You ever hear somebody say it like that? You're not wrong. So I've thought about that. I've looked into it. The phrase carries nuance in a way. It can be a way to soften agreement, to acknowledge a point without fully endorsing it. It can also suggest there's more to the conversation, a subtle way to leave room for complexity, alternative viewpoints, or even a touch of humor. Sometimes people do intend the sense you're not wrong to have a little bit of a humorous aspect to it, right? There's politeness, diplomacy, ambiguity. Tiny language choices shape our interactions, often without us even realizing it. And it can be interesting to stop and think about thinking, because really that's kind of what you're doing when you're looking at language, because language is really just a frequently flawed element of how we communicate. In a very real way, the flaws of society are really the flaws of our language and of our concepts. And of course, you could broaden that out to just say the flaws in humanity in general if you want. But sometimes it pays to narrow things down and be more specific, and we're supposed to use language to do that, right? That's the purpose of conversation. Although sometimes, like I said, the best conversations we can have are those that might lack a purpose. Do we always need a reason to talk? Is every conversation supposed to achieve something? Well, the short answer is no. Engaging in lighthearted, unstructured conversations can be incredibly valuable. You can build relationships that way. Casual conversations strengthen social bonds, build trust, and create a sense of connection between people. They can reduce stress. Lighthearted chats allow us to unwind, relax, and find humor in our day. They can boost creativity, perhaps sometimes more than a more structured conversation. Unstructured dialogue often leads to unexpected insights and ideas that we just wouldn't have if we were sort of, I guess, boxed in when it comes to the conversations that we've had. You know, they're also important for enhancing communication skills. It's a little bit like if you're a musician. If you're sitting with another musician and sometimes playing music with them, you're probably going to become a better musician over time. The same thing is true of talking to people and having these more free flowing conversations. You might even learn stuff about yourself that you didn't really know. You can realize that you know some things that you didn't even know that you knew. You might have forgotten something, and you're like, "Aha! I remember that now." It's like when I've gone to trivia night. I'm not somebody who really goes to bars that often, but sometimes I do go to trivia night, and it happens to be at a bar. And sometimes, it can be a little bit frustrating because I don't always remember all of these things that I may have thought I've known. But occasionally, I'm going to be the person at the table who is the only one who somehow knew something that nobody else there knew. So sure, it sometimes can be like a little blast to the ego if you forget something that you that you know, but you just can't like think of the name or the date or whatever the detail may be, and you don't get the answer right. It can be a little bit disappointing, but sometimes you get maybe a little ego boost because you really helped the team win the round or something like that. That's an example of these you know surprises that we can have if we're just out in the world and sort of you know having to have our memories jogged. And if you're in a less structured environment, sometimes that can happen even more if you're in a creative mode, I suppose. And sometimes you need to be out interacting with other people in order to tap into that creativity. So, engaging in different types of conversations can improve our ability to, navigate both casual and serious discussions. And there's a lot of spontaneity and fun that can happen, which is, sometimes why it pays to get in with the right crowd. If you know people who actually bring out the best and who make you laugh, and hopefully you can make them laugh, and yada, yada, yada. Not everything in life needs a goal beyond that. Sometimes you just need to relax and have a good time and joke around or whatever. And some of the best moments come from conversations that just happen, through the random life events or going out into social environments where you're not just cooped up inside and alone all the time. So if you ever find yourself wondering, do I need to have a purpose when talking to somebody? The answer is simply no, not necessarily. Sometimes the best conversations are the ones that exist purely for the joy of talking. And, that they can sometimes inspire, you know, stories if you are out and about. I'm sure we've all got stories that are fascinating based on our social interactions. Not every social interaction is like a horror story. Well, hopefully, I think sometimes we've got good stories to tell about other people and our own experiences. And that's a part of the magic of storytelling and writing, is that you're really sort of transcribing your experiences in a way, sort of like a composer will transcribe the musical thoughts in their head. That's what you're doing with language in general. Words have the power to bring stories to life, whether it's through deep, meaningful conversations or the way we structure our writing. Refining our language skills makes us better communicators. So, here are a few very basic tips that I'm going to leave you with here. Use vivid descriptions, appeal to the senses to make your writing come alive. Show, don't tell. I already mentioned this, but the point of that is let actions and dialogue convey emotions instead of I was stating them outright. Although sometimes, like I said, you might want to break that rule and state something outright. Sometimes you have to kind of dumb it down in order for the story to flow better, even. And you also have to keep in mind your audience, because if you're using too much flowery language and not dumbing it down, it can come off like you're just showing off as a writer or as a speaker or whatever. So you're going to want to kind of balance things out, like a professional writer of the modern era would. The whole flowery language thing can be great, but if you're trying to get a point across nice and succinctly, then sometimes you might just want to do that. So the point there is to vary sentence structure. A mix of short and long sentences keeps the rhythm engaging. I don't know if you've ever read any old timey sort of stories, but they often have these sentences that just go on and on and on. And they can be beautiful things, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you can actually get lost in them, like they're a labyrinth or something like that. So you might want to avoid that approach sometimes, especially if you're just trying to come up with a quick message to enhance whatever you're trying to communicate. And you're going to want to edit ruthlessly sometimes, cut unnecessary words, and make every word count. So when I was a student at the prestigious Finlandia University, my English professors would sometimes tell me cut out the dead wood, and that means just try to convey ideas in a relatively simple way. Don't bog your senses down with unnecessary words. And again, there are probably exceptions to that rule as well. You don't always have to write in a certain way. Maybe you've got a character who speaks in a way where they are just excessively wordy. I've seen characters like that in movies and TV shows, and they exist in books and whatnot too, I'm sure. So, keep in mind possible exceptions, but generally, you're just want to you're just going to want to cut unnecessary words out. And here I'm messing up my own sentences when I'm talking, but I'm not following the most rigid script here. I'm a little bit improvising as I speak. So keep practicing. Writing is a craft that improves with time and effort, just like if you're a painter or a musician. When I started on guitar, I was, I felt like a failure, basically. I had no idea what I was doing. And now, even though I still feel that way sometimes, like I still haven't found a lot of stuff out, I can at least pick up the guitar, and I have a rough idea of what I can do. You know, I have a feel for the instrument. Well, the same is true of language. If you practice enough, you're going to become a better communicator. So that's it for today's episode, and hopefully this was kind of in depth and not boring at the same time. If you enjoyed what I was talking about, be sure to subscribe, especially on YouTube, and we can keep the conversation going. So until next time, keep talking, keep writing, and keep connecting. and have a fantabulous day.